When you say nation, you talk about land. Our land is Africa. That's undeniable. This land is not our land.
That what Frantz Fanon's theory, psychological theory, is that we're in a post-colonial psychology. And what he calls that is an auto-destructional stage, which is the oppressor will oppress for so long that the oppressed no longer have to be physically oppressed. They do it to themselves automatically.
I'm black. Do you hear me, man? Do you understand? I am black. I'm a nigga. Do you understand me? I was born black. I live black. And I'm gonna die probably because I'm black. Because some cracker that knows I'm black better than you, nigga, is probably gonna put a bullet in the back of my head.
Hey, man, it's like this, man. It's like, you know, it's like it's revolution time, man. There's no questions asked. Revolution is here. You know what I'm saying? We the youth, we the young. It's time for us to break loose, you know? We don't have no freedom, no rights, man. We slaves right now. Everybody's still a slave. That's what they told us today. In other words, you still a slave. No matter how much money you got, you still ain't shit. So, you know, it's on, just like that. Just like
are really ready and willing to pay the price that is necessary for freedom. Our people will always be walking around here second-class citizens, or what you call 20th century slaves.
What price are you talking about, sir?
The price of freedom is death.
What's the figure?
I mean, what are you in this for? You want power, you want revenge, you know? What is it?
It's simple, Willie. I just want to be free.
Hey, peace, Uhuru, Amani Naguvu to the family. Welcome to another study session, Dr. Amos Wilson study session. But tonight, I'm going to continue to examine Black on Black violence. Black on Black violence, the psychodynamics of Black self-annihilation in service of white domination. So it's been a while. It's been more than a month, maybe even 2 months since I delved into this text. I'm going to be picking up on chapter 3. That's where I last left off at. And it's a very important topic too. American Society, Crimogenic Society. American Society, Crimogenic Society. And what does that mean? It means that American society creates the criminal element that we see in the Black community, in society in general, but particularly in the Black community. So when we look at mass incarceration, even the first mass incarceration of African people in the United States, which took place during the Reconstruction period, we can see that the disproportionate number of Black people behind the prison walls was a part of America's plan to re-enslave African people, to maintain their control and power over the labor and over the consciousness, over the behavior of African people in this country. So, you know, I'm definitely looking forward to going through this chapter. It's a short chapter. I think I may read through the whole thing, or I may just highlight some parts. I'll see where the study takes me. But, you know, for those who are tapping in for the first time, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, like and share. I'm Ikemba Ajore, one of the organizers here of We Charge Colonialism. You know, there's ways you can support We Charge Colonialism as well if you want to become a Patreon member. All the information is in the description. I have also added the link to the book in the chat. So if you click on that link, you will have access to the PDF of Black on Black violence. So, you know, you don't have to wait for these study sessions. It's a very important text, and I think it gets to the heart of the problem that we have in our community when it comes to the aggression that we perpetrate against one another, the aggression that we display towards our brothers and sisters. A lot of that has to do with the conditions that we are in under colonialism, the condition, the environment that we have been forced to survive in. And so, I think we'll get into this when I read the book. But there's also, before we get into the book, I want to share, as I was doing some research. So I was doing some research on Crimogenic Society. I'm going to pull this up. Crimogenic Capitalism. Matter of fact, I should have been sharing this. So, criminogenic capitalism, we look at this definition right here, and I came across this just by doing some research. I was interested in this term, crimogenic, and crimogenic and criminogenic are synonyms. But if you look at this definition, I think it really describes the type of society that we live in, right? Criminogenic capitalism. Make this a little bigger. Criminogenic capitalism is a term used to describe a social and economic system in which the pursuit of profit leads to crime and criminal behavior. The concept suggests that the capitalist system itself creates conditions that foster crime, and that the pursuit of profit is fundamentally incompatible with the maintenance of a just and lawful society. I mean, that right there, really describes colonial capitalism. When we think about ghettos and hoods, quote unquote, hoods, these are byproducts of colonial capitalism and racism, because the racism that exists within our society, that is the motivating force that influences white society to target the Black community. So we become the target of the white supremacists under the system of colonial capitalism, because colonial capitalism can find victims even within its own group, and which it does. But under a racist system, or the white supremacist system, the main target, or the primary target of the racists has historically been the African. There has been other people as well, who have been victims of white supremacy, people in the Asian community, the Arab community, the Native American community. All of them have also been victimized by the system of white supremacy. But it has been the African, the Black race that has been the primary target of the white supremacists. And even when you look at how they categorized race, it was the African, the Black, that was at the bottom of the hierarchy in race, right? So we were always looked at as the most inferior of all groups, right? 1 second. So I just wanted to pull this up. Let me read the rest of this. The term criminogenic capitalism was coined by criminologist Kevin Haggerty in his book Crime and the Risk Society, published in 2002. Now I gotta read that. Every time I come across these books, man, I gotta read this. So Crime and the Risk Society is another book I had to pick up, which I'll get to in a second. Haggerty argued that the rise of the risk society, characterized by an increasing reliance on markets and individual responsibility, has led to a situation in which crime is seen as a normal and inevitable part of the social and economic landscape. He argued that the pursuit of profit has come to dominate all other values, and that this had a corrupting influence on society, leading to a range of social and environmental harms. Right. So again, like going back to colonial capitalism and when we look at mass incarceration that began during Reconstruction, I'm not even talking about the crack era. Hey, peace. Oh, man. Yo, good to see you. Good to see you. I actually need to, I did a poor job in like sharing this too. So I'm gonna share this with some folks while I'm, going through this. But the first mass incarceration that took place during the Reconstruction era, if you look at the 13th Amendment, this is how all of this is by design. We come out of chattel slavery, not even a year removed from chattel slavery, less than a year removed from chattel slavery. 1866. It was, at the end of 1865. Actually, in 1865, it passed House. 13th Amendment passed House, but it was enacted later on in 1866. But with the passage or enactment of the 13th Amendment, even coming out of chattel slavery, the clause in the 13th Amendment said that slavery is abolished, except for the clause, except for the with the exception of a punishment for a crime, the punishment of a crime. And so that clause, simultaneously as that's being passed, you have black codes that are being instituted throughout the South. And these black codes were used to criminalize African Americans or black people in this country, right? So it was 13th Amendment and black codes worked hand in hand. 13th Amendment and black codes, the same amendment that abolished slavery, also opened the door for a new form of slavery. And when you look at that history, convict leasing, peonage, which was debt slavery, chain gangs, all of this was going to took place during Reconstruction. But we can go back even further than Reconstruction. Prior to that, even during the antebellum period and prior to that, free black folks, free black people in this country, in the United States, were being criminalized. So the criminalization of black people, of free black people, during the period of chattel slavery in this country took place, right? So there's this long history. Now, so going back to Crimogenic Society, how this society creates criminals. That's the point of this. Well, that's the point of the book, really. But in chapter 3, and let me pull that up. Peace to the family. How's everybody doing out there too, man? I hope everybody's well. Make sure y'all like and share too, because these, I feel like it's very important that we have this conversation when we're talking about intercommunal violence. And it's something that, a lot of us experience. We experience a lot of friends, family, whether we know somebody personally or not, a lot of us have been impacted by intercommunal violence, also known as black on black violence, right? 1 second here. I should have did this earlier. All right. So let me share this. Again, the link in the chat is a link to the book. See, this is what I do, man. I went and got this PDF for you guys. So you have access now to Dr. Amos Wilson's book, Black on Black Violence. But make sure you purchase the hard copy if you got the resources as well. We have to, support our institutions. So, so I'm here on starting from chapter 3. I'm gonna get right into it, so I don't have y'all here for too long. Let's get right into this. So, American Society, Crimogenic society, if we are not to speak of individuals as criminal, can we then refer to a criminal society? I think we can describe our society as criminal. Indeed, I think we must. And so this is a book right here, Edwin, is it Scher, Our Criminal Society. So, you know, this is another book. Every time I come across a book, I gotta grab it. I have to read it. Like I came across reading Black on Black Violence. I came across Blaming the Victim. Blaming the Victim is a powerful read, written in the 1970s. And I've been going through that book, and you know, I want to definitely suggest you guys pick that up. William Ryan, Blaming the Victim, right? Because he gets into the framework that's used by the oppressor, who is creating the conditions, right? Creating the conditions that produces the criminal element, right? And then flips the problem on the individuals within the society after it creates the conditions, and it creates the problem, and then it turns around and blames the victim for being influenced or being impacted by the problem that was created. So let me give you an example, because I feel like I fumbled that. So, you know, an example is lead. One of the examples that's used in the book is lead poisoning or lead paint, and how children in a household become poisoned by the lead paint in the home. But even though it's illegal to have lead paint in the home, the parent is to blame for not protecting the child from lead paint, not doing a better job of making sure that the child isn't impacted or affected by the lead paint in the household. So they blame the mother, the individual, but this is a universal problem where you have all of these homes where children are exposed to it, right? But even though it's illegal, the society doesn't create something or put something in place to solve the problem of the lead paint in the homes. Instead, they blame the mother or the parents for not protecting their child. So it becomes an individual thing. So in the book, it kind of like really gets into like this universalistic solutions versus an exceptional solutions. And a lot of the solutions that American society sort of creates is sort of like these exceptional solutions to, meaning that they develop solutions for individual problems, even though it's a systemic problem, right? So we go in circles. It's a revolving door. We never solve the problems. We never solve the problems of violence. We never solve the problems of other criminal of theft, the problems of miseducation. You know, because it's not only crime. There's other social issues, homelessness. None of these problems get solved because it becomes individualized. And so in the book Blaming the Victim, though, he definitely like goes into that framework that's used and exposes that. So you know, it's a pretty good read. And I suggest you guys look into that. Hey, good evening. Welcome. It's good to see folks joining, man. You know, I'm over here stalling, waiting for y'all. But nah, seriously though, you know, appreciate y'all jumping on. Make sure you like and share. Let me get into it though. So it's not a long chapter, and I had mentioned this before. I may read the whole thing, or I may just like highlight certain parts of the chapter. We'll see how things go. All right. But this opening part, I think, is definitely important. So human behavior, regardless of type, like other forms of behavior, can only be defined and understood in relative terms. Human behavior only reflects meaning relative to the behavior of other human beings and can best be understood in terms of human relations. criminal behavior is human behavior. It is social behavior. It is not delimited, discontinuous, and individual as is typically implied by established social scientists. The individual, the subgroup, or subculture are individual or collective only in the sense that they uniquely represent the social history, experience, socialized perspectives, values, and behavioral expressions endemic to a social system as a whole. Individual subgroups and the social systems in which they exist and with which they interact are continuous, each mutually defining the other, each interdependently interpenetrating the other, each to some very significant degree helping to shape the other. In the individual, in the group, we see the social system as uniquely represented by that individual or group. In him or it, we see the system of social political relations and microcosm. Right? I thought that was a powerful opening because it's kind of, when I read the rest of this chapter, it's going to speak to what Dr. Wilson is getting at in this opening. The individual is a product of the society. Right here, he's talking about society. He really doesn't get into how society also reflects, I think, the collective, the individuals, organized individuals. But he will go further into that later on. But right here, he's really talking about the individual being a microcosm of the macrocosm, which is the society in which they live. And so when we're talking about a criminal, an individual criminal, he's only a reflection of the criminality that exists in the society. Or another way to say it is that, because the society is crimogenic or criminogenic, it produces in individuals a criminal behavior. And I know he kind of, I'm just summing up what he said in all of these words, but that's what he's getting at. So it's this interaction that's taking place between the individual or the group within the society and with the society as a whole, right? And it's that so criminal behavior does not happen in a vacuum, right? And so it's important to understand that history or the experience of the individuals and groups within that society. Black American criminality, whether in its individual or subgroup form, is a microcosmic reflection of the macrocosmic American system, and beyond that, of the system of European global domination. The intrapsychic motivational orientation of the Black American individual or subgroup is driven and structured by the nature of his or its social, political, ecological encounters with European Americans and Europeans in general, right? The European is creating, I know, it's almost saying, okay, do Black people have any agency? Because some people may argue that, all right, we giving all of this power to the European as far as them creating the criminal element within the Black community. And we do have choices, right? So that could be an argument that people make, but we have to understand under the condition of under colonialism, under the system of colonial capitalism, the power of Black people has been limited or delimited, or they have been made powerless as a result of that relationship. And so even with agency, unless you're like really fighting or resisting the system and looking to overturn the relationship, which many people under the system of colonialism, sadly to say, the masses of people aren't attempting to do that. What you see is Black people trying to adjust to the system of colonial capitalism, right? And with that being said, because of it living in a racist system where many doors are closed, opportunities are closed to Black people just because of the social group that they belong to, them being locked out of the system creates the criminal element within the system. So if I'm not able to own land, which we have a history of not being able to own land or move in certain communities, right? Or able to make enough wages to be able to survive within colonial capitalism, then there's things that I have to do, you know, in order to survive. But things that's deemed illegal, right, or criminal by the social structure, right? And this goes back to the creation of the criminal, how European domination of Black people, how they can create the laws in which are the ground rules in which we have to survive, right? And if we don't follow those rules and laws, it creates the criminal element within our society. And this is what happens. So he's going to continue to really flush this out. These encounters are not ones between equals, nor are they ones characterized by mutual respect and reciprocity. These frontiers of disparate intergroup encounter are the nodal points at which both Black criminals and Black law-abiding citizens are produced. They are both Eurocentric creations, as are the nature and quality of their social relations and functions. In this context, the Black American criminal is law-abiding. This is a great point that's being made. In this context, the Black American criminal is law-abiding, obeying the laws of the Eurocentric criminalization process. Black criminality is not accidental, coincidental, or aberrant, but speaks to an apparent need in the white American community to induce criminality in a significant proportion of the Black American community, as well as its need to perceive African Americans as innately criminal, just as it exhibits the related need to perceive the average African American as innately intellectually inferior, right? So again, he's really fleshing this out. So I'm gonna just go on to the next part. The criminalization of the Black male. In light of the foregoing and of the forthcoming, we must recognize that within limits, alleged Black crime is socioeconomically functional for the white American status quo and is ultimately symptomatic of the societal needs of powerful segments of the American class structure and of its dysfunctionality. In this context, we must ask and answer the following questions. Why do white Americans need to criminalize significant segments of the African American population? This is a question we must ask. What is the socio-political function of alleged African American criminality and self-destructive behavior in American society? How does alleged Black American criminality sustain the American status quo? How is criminal motivation induced into the personalities and social relations of some African Americans, and for what reasons? While the scope of this book will not allow us to adequately deal with these questions, they must be answered and the answers pragmatically utilized if the alleged criminality, self-destructiveness, and victimization of African Americans are to be eradicated in Black American communities. All right, so even, I wouldn't stop there. Going back to these questions, again, he said in this book, he can't adequately answer these questions, but maybe this is something that we need to revisit and expand on, in our own writings or in our own think tanks or meetings, right? Because it is, when we're talking about intercommunal violence, it is a serious issue in our community. The number of people we can look at, there's a small number of people within the Black community that are committing acts of violence against other Black people, right? As far as just population wise, right? There's a small percentage, but the impact that it impacts, more people than just the victim, right? It impacts family members, it impacts friends, especially like when you look at gun violence, for instance. The murder of an individual is going to impact the person's brothers, sisters, cousins, mothers, fathers, their friends. So you're talking about 10, 20, 30, maybe, people from just the loss of one life that could be traumatized or impacted in some way. So it does have a large, effect on our community, despite the small percentage
of acts of violence that may be perpetrated. So that's just something I think we should keep in mind. So it is something that we need to root out. With that being said, though, it's a problem that still persists. In the 80s, it was a serious problem. In the 90s, as far as gun violence, right? But even prior to that, we were dealing with intercommunal violence. But recently, there has been an uptick, an escalation in violence that is taking place. And why is that? These are some questions that we have to answer. Why is the rate, and this is something I looked at before, the rate of violence within the white community is decreasing at a lesser, is decreasing population-wise, but in the Black community is increasing. Does that have something to do with racism, colonial capitalism? I think that it does. But some of these questions here, I think we have to revisit and begin to build on, and begin to, create those institutions or those spaces that can address these problems. We still haven't done that. We still haven't put anything in place. And one of the things that Dr. Wilson talks about in this particular chapter is white America, or the status quo, they're not going to solve the problem because they benefit from these problems. It's going to take the members of the community to come up with the solutions for these problems. So that's a call even with myself to think of the type of institution that I would like to build and see in the community to address this. The rates of Black on Black homicidal violence, assault, and victimization, though biased and inaccurate, are alarming. The percentages cited in the prior chapter say something ominously significant, not only about the collective character of Black America, but all the more so about the collective character of white America. I think this was first published in the 1980s, 86, if I'm not mistaken, 85, 86, something like that. But it's interesting how many years ago was that? 40 years ago? But how this is still relevant today. So, we can't keep going in circles, man. We talking about the same problem that today that they were talking about in the 80s. No solution yet. So let's not have to read this 40 years from now, and still be dealing with the same issues. So, let's read this to develop solutions. That being said, the percentages in the prior chapter have been used by a very significant and influential proportion of white America to stereotypically assassinate the character of the collected African personality in general, and to indict the Black American male as an innately criminal in particular. And that speaks to even the title of this book, right? Black on Black violence. I would assume that Dr. Wilson wrote that today, he probably wouldn't use that same title. But, you can see he's conscious of the fact of how the statistics are used to try to paint African or Black people as innately or inherently criminal or violent, right? And then you come up with these phrases or terms such as Black on Black violence, right? As if intercommunal violence doesn't exist in other communities at a high rate. In the eyes of white American, an exaggeratedly large segment of Black America is criminally suspect. This is especially true relative to the Black American male. In the fevered mind of white America, he is cosmically guilty. His guilt is existential. For him to be alive is to be suspected, to be stereotypically accused, convicted, and condemned for criminal conspiracy and intent. On the streets, in the subways, elevators, parks, in the wrong neighborhood, from late childhood to late adulthood, he is feared, suspiciously scrutinized, cautiously approached, or warily avoided, right? If we understood this in the 80s, what we had to worry about Trayvon Martin, what we would have had things in place, or what we had done, what was necessary to prevent a Trayvon Martin or an Ahmaud Arbery, right? Or a George Floyd or Mike Brown, all right? So, how do we avoid this from happening? But he's getting to the root of how an environment is created, through media misrepresentation and propaganda, for one. To be a sensitive Black male, no matter how innocent, law-abiding, all-American, patriotic, altruistic, and loving, is to see the dilated pupils of fear in white women's and old men's eyes, to witness the defensive clutching at pocketbooks, to see yourself reflected in the mirrors of the other's eyes as a mugger, thief, and rapist. To be a perceptive Black male is to look out at an accusative world and feel oneself the object of a suspicion, ocular examination by trigger-happy policemen, to have your papers checked by security personnel while your white counterpart passes the checkpoint without question. To be a Black male is to have your integrity chronically under question, to always have to somehow verbally or non-verbally communicate convincing reasons for being where you are if you are not in your place. Only the carefully presented facade, the meticulous expression of non-aggression, non-assertive body language, the representation of a carefully managed, non-threatening persona or old age, only standardized, non-Black dress, standardized English, averted eyes intently focused on a leading newspaper, magazine, or book can alleviate to some tolerable degree the fears and suspicions of others. But this diminution of fear and suspiciousness is in others bought at the too high price of self-annihilation is always tentative, delicate, and is easily rent by the smallest misstep or the tiniest deviation. Damn, he said something. A lot of that was powerful, but this, I don't know, this caught my attention though right here though. But this diminution of fear and suspiciousness in others bought at the too high price of self-annihilation. Self-annihilation is always tentative, delicate, and is easily rent by the smallest misstep or the tiniest deviation. Man. And, that self-annihilation part, that's something that we continue to do, but the history of self-annihilation has brought us, this process of self-annihilation has created the Black man and woman of today. Like it has shaped us, and it has shaped us into who we are, in this current environment, in this current state. So the way that we think, the way that we behave, the way that we dress, man, all those things, man, I don't know. It's just like really, it's making me reflect, because a lot of our people, the masses of people, have not come into consciousness, right? And even those of us who've come, and when I say consciousness, when we used to say come into consciousness, that always meant knowledge of self. It could, nowadays, I don't know, it means something, something different to other people these days. But there was a time when we talked about people who were conscious or coming into consciousness. That meant like you gain the knowledge of self, and sort of you become awakened to the actual relationship that you have with the oppressor and the colonizers, with the European. So you kind of you understand or understood the wool that has been pulled over your eyes, right? And so now that you have come into consciousness, you begin that pursuit of like deep dive into your history and who you are, and you try as much as you can to understand the reality that you're living in, not the reality that the European has painted and presented to you, but the actual reality, right? And so that's what we meant. And so, but most people have not come into consciousness. We know that. And so, they're part of this process, and they have been a part of this process of self-annihilation, and not just a physical, but also a mental, right? There's not even respect for the ancestors, man. When you even think about those who fought, I mean, I came across people who was disrespecting Malcolm X, man. I remember Malcolm X used to be untouchable. You never you know, not just him, but, you know, others too, Garvey and so forth. But like some of these people used to be sacred. Even if you didn't agree with Malcolm X, you know, there was still that level of respect. But I'm seeing this new generation, like not respecting the ancestors, not respecting the movement, not respecting, you know, and of course, you know, not respecting themselves or even the elders in the community. Just a lot of that is changing. But, you know, that's what, you know, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but it just like really has me reflecting on this self-annihilation. And this is what Dr. Bobby Wright was talking about with menticide, right? Menticide, because the ultimate aim of menticide is the destruction of the Black race, the decimation, the annihilation of the Black race and or Black people. And I'm not sure if he meant that just on a physical level, but I think like even if it's not only physical, you know, the annihilation of Black people, African people, can happen mentally, where you have Black people walking around but don't even know who they are, don't know that they're Black, don't know that, you know, they are descendants of African people, don't want to have anything to do with that. You know, they want to be whiter than even the European, you know, and some of them already are. So I don't know, that resonated with me a lot. So given the historical and contemporary virulence of white racism in America and the injustice toward Blacks that such racism engenders, the number of arrests, incarcerations, and in many instances, convictions of Black males should be viewed with a jaundiced eye. The willingness of white Americans to heavily tax themselves in order to finance accelerated and increased prison construction, rapidly expanding police forces and so-called criminal justice system personnel, burgeoning private police and security establishments, their willingness to finance the incarceration of a Black male prisoner upwards of $30,000 to $40,000 per year, in sharp contrast to their unwillingness to tax themselves to provide for the appropriate funding of the education of Black children and to commit themselves to the ending of racist employment practices, to provide adequate housing, medical care, food, and clothing, clearly implies the alleged Black male criminality plays a very important role in defining the collective white American ego and personality. Yeah, I mean, you have those who represent the status quo, because we got these neo-colonialists, you know, to be honest, like white power and Black face, right? We got these folks, as well as white folks, right? Their solution is the continued incarceration. Let's build more prisons. Let's hire more police, right? Let's expand the injustice system, right? To solve the criminal element that exists within the Black community, a criminal element that has been created by the system itself, by the racist colonialists. They created the hoods and the ghettos are byproducts of the colonial capitalist system and the racist system. But with that being said, they would rather spend the money on the continuing incarceration, right? The continued tying Black people to the criminal justice system and justice system, then spend money on providing opportunities for them, right? There's this thing, I don't want my tax dollars, they have to work hard like I worked hard. I don't want my tax dollars going to, the education of Black folks. I don't want my tax dollars going to, no, they got to work for it, going to job training and so forth, right? To their education or to their upliftment. But they don't mind their tax dollars going to the incarceration of the same group of people, right? So it's a serious contradiction, but that has a lot to do with just the racism that exists within a lot of these folks. Even our own people have adopted racist ideology. The typical white American response to the so-called criminality of the Black male when closely examined, clearly indicates that it is more consistent with a conscious and unconscious need to instigate and sustain Black criminality as a highly visible and publicized component of American society, then with a yearning to reduce its destructive influence on both Black and white societies. White American needs and expressly hype Black American criminality the way a neurotic patient needs his symptoms, despite his protest to the contrary. In other words, the existence of Black American criminality, alleged and actual, is a political, economic, social, psychological necessity for maintaining white American psychical and material equilibrium. Black American criminality apparently serves fundamental Eurocentric psychopolitical needs and is engendered and sustained for this reason. We will now examine some of these needs. So white America paranoia. So I'm gonna go into let me see 37. I might can finish this. Let's see. To look at the world or a segment of it with a rigid, hyper alert and all-consuming expectation. Because there's a few more pages. So I want to let's see if I can go. So next time I do this, I'm starting from chapter 4. Chapter 4. And again, appreciate everybody that's having it. Let me see what the folks is up to, though. I've been looking at the page. Let me see what's going on, man. Peace, peace, peace. Asa's in the building. Gullah Geechee. Indeed, brother Nkrumah, man. Appreciate you. I had to summarize and shorten it to fit the chat. Let me see what we got here. I want to see, because you always coming with the profound comments, man. I tell my children Black on Black violence is a myth created to install fear in us. Being we have such a long history in survival, we dominate that realm. Therefore, they had to install fear of it in us. That's that's a serious fact, man. Again, and I think if Dr. Amos Wilson wrote this book today, he would probably choose a different title because, he would see how that phrase Black on Black violence has been used to continue to instill fear in all communities, instill fear in the white community and in the Black community, where we don't even want to be around each other. And I think that it has done a great job. And you have people who still will use this term or use this phrase Black on Black violence to describe what happens in our community. We can say intercommunal violence, we can say horizontal violence to acknowledge that there's aggression and violence that is perpetrated against other members of our community. But it's nothing singular about it. It's nothing unique. It's not an anomaly. Every community has a high percentage, a high percentage of aggression and violence committed against other members of their community, because you live in the same community, you live next to them, right? If we lived in a community, if I lived in a community that was predominantly white, most of the crime that is, and if we were Black and we lived in a predominantly white community, most of the crime that we commit will probably be against white people in that community, right? We probably would be clicking up with the Black people in the community, like, especially if those people had resources, right? But because of the proximity of other Black people in the community, we see because of the proximity of other Black people, or in any community, proximity of other members of the community being of the same race or ethnic group, then of course you're going to have a high percentage of crime. Now, I think that what we do have to acknowledge, though, is that it is happening disproportionately in our communities when it comes to other communities, but the disproportional acts of violence compared to other communities has a lot to do with racism. It has a lot to do with capitalism. It has a lot to do with colonialism, right? Not having access to resources, the same resources that other communities have. When you look at in America, for instance, in America, for instance, almost 90% of the wealth is controlled by white people in this country. So I don't, it doesn't matter how much income you are making. At the end of the day, you could be making all the income in the world, but there's still that dependence. Unless you have wealth, unless you have control of the land, there's still that dependence on the people who control the land, who control the water, who control those vital resources, those resources that's necessary for your survival, right? Because that money can be devalued. The person who has the land, they really can set the they really can determine the value of money or paper money. How much that dollar is really worth. How much that gold, how much that silver is really worth, right? What we got going on here? I'm gonna get back to this book in a minute. I just want to engage the folks, man, and peace to all y'all. Just think the African male is actually the apex predator, from hunting to historical experience in warfare. Hence, us dominating in the realm of survival. We have been trained to fear each other. He actually going. I'm not even going to get into that. When I finish reading this chapter, he's going to speak to this point that you are making right here. Yes. Appreciate y'all. Let me get back to this. Appreciate the comments too. So he's going to talk about the black male in a second, but going to this white American paranoia. To look at the world or a segment of it with a rigid, hyper alert, and all-consuming expectation to search reality repetitively only for confirmation of one's suspicions, while ignoring aspects of that reality which disconform those suspicions. To pay no attention to opposing rational arguments, cogent, well-founded evidence, except to find in them only those features that seem to confirm one's original views, to examine reality with extraordinary prejudice, rejecting facts, information, and alternative possibilities, while seizing on and exaggerating any scintilla of often irrelevant evidence that supports one's original expectations, denotes a driven need, a psychoneurotic, psychopathological need to defend an ego perilously in danger of disintegration and to defend it regardless of cost to oneself and others. Such a suspicion and paranoid orientation speaks to the need to rigidly construct and control reality so as to maintain self-control, to empower the ego, and to gainfully exploit a relevant situation. This rigidity of attention, stereotypical viewing of the world, this chronic condition of hyper-alertness, hypersensitivity, this need to create the world according to one's own deluded images, to subject others to one's paranoid views, to exploitatively have them serve that need, bespeaks the greater need to gain ego satisfaction and enhancement, self-definition and material gain through manipulating the behavior and consciousness over others. Paradoxically, this greater need bespeaks a fundamental dependency on the world and others, and simultaneously of a protest against and denial of that dependency. It expresses an ego vulnerability, which must remain defensively hidden, an ego weakness, which must... I'm not used to reading out loud. Ego vulnerability, which must remain defensively hidden, an ego weakness, which must appear to itself and others as strength, an extremely tense, unstable ego whose tenuous equilibrium can only be maintained by projecting that tension and vulnerability into the world and others. Thus, the keeper of law comes to need the outlaw. Woo! That's a quote right there. The keeper of law comes to need the outlaw, and needing him creates him. Thus, the keeper of law comes to need the outlaw, and needing him creates him. The keeper of the disturbs the peace by projecting, I think that's a typo, peace by projecting hallucinated hostile threats where they do not exist. That the white America must see virtually every black male as criminal. Going back to the African male, right? That you mentioned. that the white American must see virtually every black male as criminal or as a potential criminal, regardless of facts to the contrary, bespeaks an intense psychic need of white America to perceive him as such. What does white America have to gain from choosing to perceive black males as stereotypically criminal? By socio-psychologically inducing black males into criminality, following the trend of thought set forth by Michael Lewis in his book, The Culture of Inequality. Alleged black male criminality is a comfort to white America, despite its protestations, protestations. I feel like I'm missing something in there, though. To the contrary, alleged black criminality, while evoking white American fear and loathing, reassures them of their vaunted self-worth, their assumed innately superior moral standing, of their self-congratulatory self-constraint, in contrast with presumed black American unworthiness. Innate inferior moral standings, inherent criminality, lack of self-constraint and self-control. White America's self-appreciation is enhanced as it insatiably feeds on overblown reports about black criminality while denying its own incomparable criminal record and its own racist imperialist incubation, and giving birth to the very same criminal forces which now threaten to destroy it. Right? So keep that, we got to keep that in mind. And this has to be, part of the education that we give our youth, when it comes to these images and when it comes to this, even this concept or idea of the nigga. Didn't want to say it, but but even this that is embraced by a lot of people in our community, we got to understand that which was created and turned into a derogatory term. That was a creation, of the European. The European created what a nigga was supposed to be, which was something that was inferior, right? And even within our own community, when we would, use that term on another brother and sister, it was parroting the white slave master or the white racist who looked at us, right, as inferior and niggas. And we would say that even to break other black people down, other Africans down, we would call them a nigga. Like, let me stop saying the word, but I think y'all get the point, Did I just break this? Where's my backup? Oh man. All right. Y'all gotta excuse me. I just broke the lens in my glass. Let me see if here we go. Man. Backup. Have patience with me, y'all. Where was I at? But but the point I'm making though and bringing this up is that the European has to break down the African into this, like, dehumanize the African in order to build themselves up, so that they can feel good about themselves, feed their self-esteem and their ego, right? So they have to, the creation of this inferior African or this criminal, only excuse me, I'm getting sidetracked, only builds up their self-worth or their esteem. So that's that's part of the the strategy or the part of the kind of losing my train of thought. But the point that Dr. Wilson is making, I think, is just like this creation, this image of an inferior black male the repercussions of that, or the other, or the effect of that, is the building up of the esteem, the superiority, or the supreme, this idea of a supreme or inferior white male, or white male or female, because there is the controlling of the Black woman's image as well. So these controlling images of the Black man and Black woman, whatever the Black man and Black woman is, that means we are not that, right? So when they create those negative images, and they're able to point and say, you know, this is what they are, this is what they represent, meaning we don't represent that. You know, we're the opposite of these people, right? And so if Black people are inherently or innately criminal, what does that say about white people, right? That we aren't. You know, this is something that we are not. So they have to create this. So Black criminals function as a negative reference group vital to maintaining the white American self-image. The Black criminal is used to support the white American community, self-serving, self-justifying judgment of itself. White American preoccupation with Black criminality betrays its own need for reinsurance, betrays its own basic insecurity regarding its projected moral purity. Consequently, the higher the incidence of reported Black criminality, the more exceptionally righteous white America feels itself to be, right? Exactly. So the more righteous it feels itself to be, the more intensely and guiltlessly it promulgates and justifies its domination and exploitation of African peoples at home and abroad. The alleged innate criminality of Black America, particularly of Black males, and their actual high level of self-destructive criminality remain incontrovertible psychopolitical necessities if the white America, incontrovertible psychopolitical necessities if the white American Eurocentric culture of inequality is to be self-justifiably continued without end. In the context of this collective necessity, more Blacks are arrested, charged, tried, convicted, and sentenced to longer prison terms for allegedly committing the same type of crimes as whites. Many are arrested, charged, tried, convicted, and sentenced to long prison terms merely for committing the crime of being Black in America. The white American community needs to stereotypically perceive Blacks as innately criminal, coupled with its social economic power to control the availability of resources and their remunerative allocation, confers on it the power of creating or controlling circumstances conducive to the satisfaction of its hegemonic requirements. Under these circumstances, the need of the collective white eagle to project an image of endemic Black criminality in order to maintain its power status quo is tantamount to the creation of Black criminality, particularly of the self-destructive kind. Right? So let me see. I think I'm going to jump to the end. There's a few. I'm on page 39. This goes to page 42. But I think I want to finish this chapter. This is important. So y'all got this. I put the link to this text if you don't have the book, but I'm not going to read this part. But if you go down here, he gets in this paragraph right here. The criminalization of Black male by white America immensely enhances its psychocultural material advantages. Criminalization of the Black male in the African American community in general by the white American community psychopolitically benefits the latter community in a myriad of ways, including the following. And you can, go through this list. It shows how the criminalization of Black males, like what benefits does it have to the European community? As you can see, one, justification of the proscription of the liberties of African peoples through continuing oppression, denial in civil and other human rights, and justification of racial discrimination and segregation. So, there's a list that Dr. Amos Wilson has here that shows how it benefits the white community. It benefits them politically and economically, socially. So you can, again, we just talked about the self-worth, the self-esteem, self-righteousness of the European, but also, it benefits them economically as well. It creates an industry for the European to benefit from. Some of these communities where these prisons are built, these prisons actually sustain some of these white communities. They create jobs. They create jobs and create businesses, right? Or help fund, some of the businesses in that community, having to feed those who, having to feed, clothe those who are in prison, and also, from the tax dollars that is used to even fund the education and social services in those communities. So there's a lot of tax dollars, there's a lot of funding that goes to white people as a result of the criminalization of Africans, right? And it's sad when you hear some of these capitalists out here, I ain't gonna say no names, but some of these capitalists out here who, so-called, Black power, will even influence Black people to even invest in prisons, man. Some of y'all might know who I'm talking about, but serious contradiction, man. But this is the mentality that some of us have, even some of us who think that we're woke and conscious, still think like a European, still think like a colonialist. So, I advise y'all to go through this. I'm just sliding through this because I want to wrap it up. I'm gonna just go to this last paragraph. A perceived high level of Black criminal activity, especially if confined to the African American community, provides both primary and secondary gains for the white American collective ego complex. Therefore, any program which can effectively erase the criminal image of the Black male and reduce his self-destructive criminality will most likely not be forthcoming from the white community, despite its pretensions to the contrary. Moreover, any effective crime control programs instituted by the African American community, the place from which any effective program must issue or gain substantial support will be by deliberate design, stealth, or neglect, targeted for neutralization by an apparently well-meaning white community, right? And that's a great point. So these are things that we have to really look out for. Any solution that we develop, we have to be prepared to protect and defend these ideas and these institutions from the white community, even the quote unquote well-meaning white community, because they all benefit from it. They benefit from it at the end of the day. And so, this is the end of chapter 3. The next chapter, which I'll pick up at the next time I do this study session, the creation of the Black criminal. Jesus, man, this is too much, boy. It's too much. But again, it's a necessary conversation. Let me see what's going on in the chat again. I'm tight because my glasses broke, and these glasses that I'm using, everything still look blurry. Shabaka. Union organization. First, we must get our people organized. Hey, yeah. Hey, we working, we trying, man. I'm excited too. With here in Philly, there's some things that's coming up. Organizations coming together to try to build some sort of assembly and some sort of Congress. So we're looking to see more organizations working together. I'm looking forward to doing that, man. And hopefully, I have some great news for you guys in the future, as far as what we got going on the ground here. The study is titled Patterns of Middle and Upper Class Homicide, and the PDF can be found on the study is published in Journal of Criminal Law. Gee, patterns. Okay. I need to write that down. Patterns. So I appreciate everybody too, man. Again, you guys give me the motivation to keep on doing this, man. I try try to be consistent with it. But forgive me, there's so much that I got going on outside of outside of home, whether it's community work or at the school. So it does get difficult for me at times to do these podcasts. But the goal and objective is to get through the book. So I don't care how long it takes. The Blueprint for Black Power, I'm still going to do that. So look out for that soon. Probably in the next week or two, I'll be doing a chapter from that book. I might have missed. Hold on, I might have missed. The reform and refinement of the system has also been effective in creating a more willing victim of white supremacy. As if it's normal, we fight from the bottom of racist America, but no qualitative change for African Black people in our historical relationship within the system. Yeah, man, that's why I'm a separatist. It becomes frustrating because I wish there were more people who were separatists. I wish it was like an everyday conversation that you have with people in your community, people that you work with who look like you. But the reality is like these conversations are not being had enough. And the only time I'm really having these conversations with people who think the same way is people who are already in the movement, are part of these organizations. And it's like, of course, like we have to do the work of educating. But even just like the fundamental, understanding of who the enemy is. Like that's it. If we had that, then like I think like that's a good place to start. But most people are in that survival mode, and they have this capitalist way, this individualistic and capitalist framework that they're working from. And so if you're not talking that language, it's really difficult to get through to them. And so I talk to the babies a lot more, because at least they are more impressionable and they haven't been fully I'm gonna say like they haven't been fully indoctrinated in the sense where what you say to them that won't have influence, right? Because people, when you get to a certain age, you can say something that can make sense, but they're kind of stuck in their ways. Like when you're talking to youth, they're still impressionable. They're still malleable, I should say, where you can kind of influence them in a positive or negative way, but we want to influence them in a positive way, right? They're more open to change and ideas, right? So that's why I try to have more conversations with them. But we tend to have to be in these spaces and talk to elders and talk to our peers who may not be in the same mind frame, but they may have access to resources, or they may be the resource, right? And so you sometimes have to convince them of the importance of this work that we're doing. That's the reality of the situation. But it becomes disheartening, man. And I know many of us feel that. The older I get, the more discontent I become. But I'm not going to give up, because it's the next generation that we're building for as well. It's not all about me. It's not all about us and our generation. But you become, at least myself, become discontent the older I get, because I'm looking around and I'm seeing us move backwards in a lot of instances. I'm seeing progress in some spaces, but I'm seeing a lot of regression. And also, when I go in certain communities, like with the gentrification even that's taking place. You know, every time I see communities being gentrified, it makes me feel like, yo, we're losing. We're losing, you know. That's a community that was lost. That's a Black community that was destroyed and lost. Every time I see a community gentrified, when I walk past and I see a Black community, I see condos in a Black community, these apartment buildings in a Black community, and it says leasing, you know, apartments for lease, right? And I know who those apartments are built for, right? I know the class and the race that is being targeted, right? So, you know, that's where I'm at with it. So I ain't gonna keep y'all all night, man. I appreciate. I see y'all going in here. So yeah. Boy, you said it, bro. Been waiting for conscious people, politically educated and organized. Work makes change. Positive propaganda. All right, yeah. All right, man. So definitely, I did this late night study. It's after 11. Y'all get some sleep. Free Mumia tomorrow, man. If you're in Philadelphia, you in the area, make sure you out there, man. Free Mumia. You can check the page, the Instagram page, to see where we're going to be at. But at 2 p.m., 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. Downtown Philadelphia, show up. You know, show up. Again, the information, location, check it out on We Charge Colonialism Instagram page. And hopefully, if you're in the area, you're out there, man. Free Mumia, free all political prisoners. You know, it's again, this goes back to, you know, my discontent and you know, frustration, man. Mumia shouldn't be behind bars. You know, the killers of Fred Hampton, you know, were able to walk around, right? And still, I don't know if they still alive or not, but you know, these are people who murdered Fred Hampton and others who were murdered by this government, who didn't, you know, our freedom fighters who weren't able to see justice served. Our community didn't see justice served, but we have, you know, Mumia still behind bars, right? You know, that's frustrating, man. But free Mumia, you know, we're gonna continue to fight. So till next time, man, continue, you know, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like, share, you know, have a good night, man. Uhuru, peace, power to the people.